cowgirl discovered her worker hidden agenda and had to choose between love and family. Can a cowgirl uncover a beautiful stranger's true motives before it's too late? Get ready for a story filled with passion. Before we get into this juicy tale, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. Welcome back to Will I Be Happy, the channel where we dive into inspiring stories of love, secrets, and the quest for happiness. I'm your host, and today we have a tale that will captivate your heart. Meet Charm, a strong-willed woman devoted to her family's farm in Iowa. When the mysterious Luke arrives as the new farmhand, Charm's world is turned upside down. He's hiding something that could unravel her family's legacy. Will Charm uncover the truth and find love along the way? Get ready for a story of romance, suspense, and emotional twists that will leave you reflecting on your own journey to happiness. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's dive into a true, compelling story together. The sun hung low over Lucky Farm, casting long shadows across the endless rows of corn and soybeans. Charm Williams stood on the porch, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. At 26, she was as much a part of the land as the crops themselves, strong, resilient, and with a spirit that matched the vast Iowa sky. "Another day, another dollar," she murmured, watching as the last of the farmhands packed up their tools. "Charm, dinner's ready," Grandma Diana called from the kitchen window, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Be right there, Grandma," Charm replied, taking one last glance at the horizon. As she turned to head inside, the distant hum of a motorcycle caught her attention. She squinted down the dusty road leading to the farmhouse. A lone rider approached, the bike's headlights cutting through the twilight. "Who's that?" Grandpa Solomon asked, stepping onto the porch beside her. Charm's eyes narrowed. "Must be Luke Shrike, the new farmhand I told you about. He's from New Jersey." Solomon grunted thoughtfully. "Bit late for a first day." "He wasn't supposed to arrive until tomorrow," she admitted. The motorcycle came to a stop near the front gate. The rider killed the engine and removed his helmet, revealing tousled dark hair and piercing green eyes. He swung his leg over the bike with practiced ease, his leather jacket hugging a well-built frame. "Evening," he called out, his voice carrying a smooth confidence. Charm descended the steps to meet him halfway. "You must be Luke." "That's me," he said with a warm smile. "Sorry for dropping in unannounced. Thought I'd get a head start." She extended her hand. "Charm Williams, welcome to Lucky Farm." He took her hand, his grip firm yet gentle. "Pleasure's all mine." Up close, she couldn't help but notice the sharp angles of his face, the hint of stubble along his jawline, and the way his eyes seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. "Come on inside," she offered. "You must be hungry after your trip." "I wouldn't say no to a home-cooked meal," he replied. Inside, the aroma of roasted chicken and freshly baked bread filled the air. Grandma Diana greeted Luke with open arms, insisting he join them for dinner. Grandpa Solomon remained reserved but polite, his eyes appraising the newcomer. As they sat around the worn wooden table, conversation flowed easily. Luke spoke of his journey from New Jersey, sharing anecdotes about places he'd seen and people he'd met along the way. "So what brings you to Iowa?" Diana asked, passing him a bowl of mashed potatoes. "Needed a change of scenery," he said, spooning a generous helping onto his plate. "Heard the Midwest has a certain charm." Charm caught his eye, a subtle smile playing on her lips. "We like to think so." Just then, the back door swung open, and Ace staggered in. His blonde hair was disheveled, and a faint smell of whiskey clung to him. "You're late," Charm said sharply. "Didn't realize I had a curfew," Ace retorted, his blue eyes landing on Luke. "Who's this?" Luke stood up politely. "Luke Shrike, the new farmhand." Ace eyed him suspiciously. "From out of town, huh?" "Ace, sit down and eat," Diana interjected, her tone firm. He grabbed a plate and slumped into a chair, casting glances at Luke between bites. After dinner, Charm showed Luke to the small guest cottage situated a short walk from the main house. The path was illuminated by the soft glow of fireflies, and the night air was cool and fragrant. "Sorry about my brother," she said. "He's going through a rough patch." "No need to apologize," Luke replied. "I get it." They reached the cottage, a quaint structure nestled under an old oak tree. "It's not much, but it's cozy," she said, opening the door. He stepped inside, surveying the simple yet comfortable furnishings. "It's perfect. Thank you." She hesitated at the doorway. "If you need anything, we're just up the path." "I appreciate it," he said, turning to face her. For a moment their eyes met, and Charm felt a flutter in her chest. "Good night, Luke," she said softly. "Good night, Charm." Hours later, Charm found herself lying awake, the events of the evening replaying in her mind. There was something about Luke, an air of mystery that both intrigued and unsettled her. Unable to sleep, she decided to take a walk to clear her head. Throwing on a light jacket over her nightdress, she slipped out of the house and made her way toward the guest cottage. A soft light glowed from the cottage window. She hesitated before knocking lightly on the door. "Just a second," came Luke's voice from inside. The door opened, and Charm's breath caught in her throat. Luke stood before her wearing nothing but a pair of low-slung sweatpants. His torso was bare, revealing a lean, muscular physique. His skin glowed softly in the lamplight, highlighting the contours of his defined chest and the subtle ripple of his abs. A faint scar traced along his left shoulder, adding a rugged edge to his appearance. "Charm?" he said, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Is everything okay?" She swallowed hard, struggling to keep her gaze from wandering. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check if you were settling in all right." He leaned against the doorframe, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That's thoughtful of you." "I didn't mean to disturb you," she added quickly, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "You're not disturbing me," he assured her. "Would you like to come in?" She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Just for a minute." Stepping inside, she noticed the room was tidy, his belongings neatly arranged. A book lay open on the small table by the window. "You're a reader?" she asked, trying to steady her nerves. He glanced at the book. "Helps me unwind." She moved closer to the table, noticing the title. "Mysteries of the Midwest," she read aloud. "Interesting choice." He chuckled softly. "Figured I should learn more about my new surroundings." She turned to face him, finding him watching her intently. "So, how are you finding it so far?" "Better than I expected," he replied. "The people are welcoming, the food is great, and the scenery," his eyes swept over her, "is breathtaking." Her heart skipped a beat. "You're quite the charmer, aren't you?" "Only when I meet someone worth charming," he said, taking a step closer. She felt a magnetic pull toward him, a tension crackling in the air. "You don't know anything about me." "Then maybe you could tell me," he suggested, his voice low. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "That's a tall order." "I'm a patient man." Their proximity was intoxicating. She could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, the subtle scent of soap mixed with something undeniably masculine. "You know," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "it's usually not a good idea to get too friendly with your employer on the first day." He raised an eyebrow. "Are we just employer and employee?" "What else would we be?" she challenged, a playful glint in her eye. He smiled, his gaze drifting to her lips. "Guess we'll find out." Just then, a loud knock startled them both. "Charm! Are you in there?" Ace's voice called from outside. She stepped back abruptly, her pulse quickening. "I should go." Luke's expression hardened slightly. "Do you have to?" She nodded. "It's late. We'll talk tomorrow." He sighed lightly. "All right. Good night, Charm." She offered a fleeting smile before slipping past him and opening the door. Ace stood there, his expression a mix of irritation and concern. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I was just checking on Luke," she replied calmly. "At this hour? Dressed like that?" He gestured to her nightdress peeking out from under her jacket. She pulled the fabric tighter around herself. "I couldn't sleep." Ace shot a glare over her shoulder at Luke, who had moved to stand behind her. "This isn't appropriate," Ace snapped. "You should go back to the house." Charm bristled at his tone. "I'm not a child, Ace." "Then stop acting recklessly," he retorted. "Is there a problem?" Luke interjected, his voice steady. "This is a family matter," Ace replied sharply. "Stay out of it." Charm placed a hand on Ace's arm. "Enough. We'll talk about this later." She turned to Luke. "Good night." "Good night," he said, his eyes lingering on hers. As she walked away, Ace fell into step beside her. "What were you thinking?" he hissed under his breath. She halted, fixing him with a stern look. "I'm not doing this with you right now." "That guy is trouble," Ace insisted. "You don't even know him," she countered. "Neither do you." She shook her head. "I'm tired of you trying to control my life." "I'm trying to protect you," he argued. "From what?" "From making a mistake," he said, his expression softening slightly. She sighed heavily. "I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of myself." They walked the rest of the way in silence. As she reached the porch, she glanced back toward the cottage. Luke stood in the doorway, watching them. Later that night, Charm lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The memory of Luke's gaze, the warmth of his presence, lingered in her mind. There was an undeniable connection between them, one that both excited and unnerved her. "Who are you, Luke Shrike?" she whispered into the darkness. Across the way, Luke stood by his window, the cool night air brushing against his skin. He watched the farmhouse, his thoughts consumed by the enigmatic woman who had just left. "Sweet dreams, Charm," he murmured. The farm was quiet under the blanket of night in Dyersville, Iowa, casting a warm golden hue across the sprawling fields of Lucky Farm. For 2 weeks, Luke Shrike had been a quiet yet intriguing presence on the farm. His hard work and mysterious aura had won over Grandma Diana and Grandpa Solomon, but Ace remained wary. Restless, Charm decided to take Midnight, her black mare, for a ride to clear her head. As she guided Midnight through the gently swaying cornstalks, the cool night air brushed against her skin. She felt a sense of freedom, the worries of the day slipping away. Up ahead, she noticed a figure standing near the old oak tree, a solitary silhouette against the luminescent sky. As she approached, she realized it was Luke, his face turned upward, lost in thought. "Can't sleep either?" she called softly, pulling the mare to a stop. He looked up, surprised but pleased. "Seems like we both had the same idea." She dismounted, leading Midnight closer. "What brings you out here?" He smiled wryly. "Sometimes the night feels more alive than the day." She nodded, feeling the weight of unspoken words between them. "It's my favorite time." He glanced at her attire, a simple tank top and jeans that hugged her figure, and felt a stirring he tried to suppress. "You have a way of appearing out of nowhere." She grinned. "Maybe you're just not paying attention." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. She stepped closer, the horse quietly grazing nearby. "You seemed deep in thought." He sighed, his gaze returning to the stars. "Just thinking about how different life is here." "Different good or different bad?" she asked, tilting her head. "Good," he assured her. "Very good." She felt a flutter in her chest. "I'm glad to hear that." He met her eyes, the moonlight reflecting in his emerald irises. "Charm, there's something about this place, about you, that feels like home." Her breath caught. "Luke." He took a hesitant step forward. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I can't ignore this connection between us." She felt the magnetic pull as he closed the distance. "I feel it too," she admitted softly. He reached out to gently brush a stray hair from her face, his fingertips grazing her cheek. The touch sent a warm shiver down her spine. "Tell me to stop, and I will," he whispered, his eyes searching hers. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I don't want you to stop." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a tender, lingering kiss. The world seemed to fade, leaving only the warmth of his embrace and the taste of possibility. When they parted, she smiled, a mix of excitement and uncertainty swirling within her. "That was..." He chuckled softly. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you." She arched an eyebrow. "Well, now that we've crossed that bridge..." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. "There's no going back." They stood together under the ancient oak, the night enveloping them in its quiet embrace. For the first time in a long while, Charm felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. A few days later, Charm Williams stood by the corral, watching Luke as he worked with one of the horses. Dressed in a snug tank top and worn jeans, she exuded a natural beauty that was hard to ignore. Luke moved with ease, his muscles flexing under his fitted t-shirt as he guided the horse with a gentle hand. "You're getting along well with Star," Charm called out, approaching the fence. Luke glanced up, a faint smile touching his lips. "She's a quick learner, just needed a bit of patience." "Is that so?" she teased. "Or maybe she just likes the attention from a handsome stranger." He chuckled softly. "Can't blame her for that." She leaned against the fence, her eyes meeting his. "You seem to have a way with the ladies, animal or otherwise." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying I've caught your eye, Miss Williams?" She felt a blush rise to her cheeks but held his gaze. "Maybe. Is that a problem?" "Not at all," he replied, his voice lowering. "In fact, I'd say it's a compliment." Before she could respond, Ace's voice cut through the air. "Charm, need a hand over here?" She sighed, rolling her eyes. "Duty calls." As she walked away, Luke watched her go, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Later that afternoon, Charm found herself in the barn, sorting through equipment. The sound of footsteps made her turn, and she saw Ace entering, his expression serious. "What's up?" she asked. Ace crossed his arms. "I saw you flirting with Luke earlier." She shrugged. "So what if I was?" He frowned. "I don't trust him." "You don't trust anyone," she retorted. "Luke's been nothing but helpful since he got here." "Helpful, maybe," Ace conceded, "but he's hiding something." She sighed. "Why do you always assume the worst?" "Because I have a gut feeling," he insisted, "and my gut's rarely wrong." She shook her head. "You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" he challenged. "What do we really know about him?" "He's from New Jersey. He loves animals and he's a hard worker," she listed. "What more do you need?" "How about why he chose our farm out of all the places in the country?" Ace pressed. "Maybe he just got lucky," she suggested with a hint of sarcasm. Ace wasn't amused. "Just be careful, Charm." She placed a hand on his arm. "I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of myself." He pulled away gently. "I hope so." That evening, the town was buzzing with excitement for the annual Harvest Festival. Charm decided to attend, thinking a night out might do her some good. She wore a simple sundress that accentuated her figure, her hair flowing freely over her shoulders. As she arrived at the festival grounds, the lively music and laughter lifted her spirits. She wandered through the stalls, sampling treats and greeting familiar faces. "Didn't expect to see you here," Luke's voice sounded behind her. She turned to see him standing there, dressed in a crisp shirt and jeans that fit him just right. "And why's that?" she asked playfully. He smiled. "Thought you might be too busy running the farm." "Even I need a night off," she replied. "Care to join me for a dance?" he offered, extending his hand. She hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. Why not? They moved to the dance floor as a slow song began to play. The melody was familiar, echoing the sentiments of a song she couldn't quite place. As they swayed together, the world around them seemed to fade. "You clean up nicely," she remarked, her eyes meeting his. "So do you," he replied, his gaze intense. She felt a flutter in her stomach. "You know, when you first arrived, I thought you were some kind of drifter." He chuckled. "And now?" "Now, I'm not so sure," she admitted. He leaned in slightly. "Maybe I'm just a beautiful stranger." She laughed softly. "Modest, aren't you?" "Just honest," he said with a wink. Their moment was interrupted as Ace appeared beside them, his expression tense. "Mind if I cut in?" Charm sighed. "Ace, we're in the middle of—" "It's important," he insisted. Luke released her hand. "I'll go grab us some drinks." As Luke walked away, Charm faced her brother. "What's so urgent?" Ace glanced around before speaking. "I found something you need to see." She frowned. "Can't it wait?" "No," he said firmly. She followed him away from the crowd to a quieter spot near the edge of the festival grounds. "What is it?" she asked impatiently. Ace pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to her. I found this in Luke's room. She unfolded it to reveal an old photograph of their farm, dated decades ago. Standing in front of the farmhouse were two young men, her grandfather and a man she didn't recognize. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to the stranger. "Robert Shrike," Ace replied, "Luke's grandfather." She looked up sharply. "Why does Luke have this?" "Because he's not here by chance," Ace said. "He's here because of some feud between our families." Charm felt a knot form in her stomach. "That doesn't prove anything." "Think about it," Ace pressed. "He shows up out of nowhere, gets close to you, and now he's digging into our family's past." She shook her head. "There has to be another explanation." "Don't be naive, Charm," he snapped. "He's using you." She glared at him. "You had no right to go through his things." "I was protecting us," he retorted. "You're overreacting," she insisted, turning to leave. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "To find Luke," she called over her shoulder. Charm found Luke near the edge of the festival, gazing out over the open fields. The moon cast a silvery glow, illuminating his thoughtful expression. "Enjoying the view?" she asked as she approached. He glanced at her, his eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. "Something like that." She took a deep breath. "I need to ask you something." "Sounds serious," he noted. She held up the photograph. "Why do you have this?" He looked at the photo, then back at her. "Where did you get that?" "Ace found it," she admitted. "Is there something you're not telling me?" He sighed heavily. "I was going to tell you, but I didn't know how." "Tell me what?" she pressed. He met her gaze. "Our grandfathers were business partners. They bought this land together. But something happened, and my grandfather left. My family lost everything." She felt her heart sink. "So you came here to take back the farm?" "No," he said firmly. "I came to find out the truth and maybe reclaim a part of my family's legacy." "By deceiving us?" she challenged. "I never lied about who I am," he pointed out. "I just didn't share everything." "That's called lying by omission," she retorted. He stepped closer. "My feelings for you are real, Charm. That hasn't changed." She searched his eyes, seeing a mix of sincerity and desperation. "I don't know what to believe." "Believe me," he whispered, reaching out to take her hand. She hesitated, but didn't pull away. "This is a lot to process." "I know," he acknowledged, "but I want to make things right." She looked down at their intertwined hands. "How do I know you're not just using me?" He gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Because when I'm with you, everything else fades away. You're the reason I want to stay." Her defenses wavered. "Luke." He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a tender kiss. The world seemed to stand still, the only sensation the warmth of his touch and the steady beat of his heart against hers. When they parted, she felt breathless. "This doesn't solve everything." "No," he agreed, "but it's a start." She managed a small smile. "Maybe we can figure it out together." He returned her smile. "I'd like that." As they walked back toward the festival hand in hand, Ace watched from a distance, his expression a mix of frustration and concern. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's me," he said quietly. "We have a problem." Back at the farmhouse, Charm and Luke sat on the porch swing, talking late into the night. Laughter and whispered confessions filled the air, the tension between them replaced with a newfound intimacy. "Tell me something true," she challenged playfully. He considered her request. "I used to be afraid of horses." She laughed in disbelief. "You? Afraid of horses?" He grinned. "Terrified, but I got over it." "Your turn," he prompted. She thought for a moment. "I sometimes dream of leaving the farm and traveling the world." "What's stopping you?" he asked. She sighed. "Responsibility. This place means everything to my family." "Maybe one day you'll find a way," he suggested. "Maybe," she agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. Unbeknownst to them, Ace was meeting with a shadowy figure near the old silo. "You sure about this?" the man asked. Ace nodded grimly. "We need to protect what's ours." The man pocketed a thick envelope Ace handed him. "Consider it done." As dawn approached, Charm and Luke reluctantly parted ways. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night," he replied, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. She watched him walk toward the guest cottage, a sense of contentment washing over her. But as she turned to go inside, a feeling of unease settled in. Something about Ace's behavior bothered her. "I hope I'm not making a mistake," she murmured to herself. The morning sun cast a golden hue over Lucky Farm, its rays filtering through the sheer curtains of Charm's bedroom. She lay awake, her thoughts tangled like the sheets around her. The revelation about Luke's connection to her family's past weighed heavily on her mind. She needed answers. Now. Determined, she dressed in a form-fitting white tank top that accentuated her toned figure and a pair of snug denim shorts that showcased her long legs. Her wavy chestnut hair fell freely over her shoulders, catching the light as she moved. With a deep breath, she headed out to find Luke. She found him by the old well at the edge of the property, his back turned to her as he gazed out over the fields. The morning light highlighted the muscular contours of his broad shoulders and back beneath his fitted gray t-shirt. His dark hair was slightly tousled, giving him a rugged, irresistible appeal. "Luke!" she called out firmly. He turned, his emerald eyes meeting hers with a mix of surprise and concern. "Charm, everything okay?" She crossed her arms, standing tall. "We need to talk." He nodded slowly. "I figured this was coming." She gestured toward the shade of a nearby oak tree. "Let's go somewhere private." They walked in tense silence until they reached the tree. The soft rustle of leaves was the only sound between them. Charm took a steadying breath before facing him. "Why didn't you tell me the whole truth about why you're here?" she demanded, her eyes searching his face. He ran a hand through his hair, the muscles in his forearm flexing subtly. "I wanted to, but I didn't know how." "Try honesty," she retorted, her gaze unwavering. He sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "You're right. You deserve the truth." She waited, her heart pounding. "My grandfather and yours were once best friends," he began. "They bought this land together, dreamed of building something lasting. But something happened, a disagreement that tore them apart. My grandfather left, and our family lost everything connected to this place." She listened intently, her expression softening slightly. "Why come back now?" "I needed closure," he admitted, "to understand what happened, to see if there was a way to reclaim a piece of what was lost." "By deceiving us?" she asked, hurt evident in her voice. He stepped closer, the heat radiating from his body palpable. "I never meant to deceive you. When I met you, everything changed. My reasons for staying became less about the past and more about you." She felt a flush rise to her cheeks, but she held her ground. "How can I trust that?" He reached out tentatively, his fingertips grazing her arm. "Because every moment I've spent with you has been real. You've felt it too. I know you have." Her resolve wavered as she looked into his eyes, the sincerity there undeniable. "Luke." He moved closer, his voice a husky whisper. "Tell me you don't feel this connection between us." She swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. "It's not that simple." "Maybe it is," he murmured, his gaze drifting to her lips. Before she could protest, he closed the distance, his lips brushing against hers softly. It was a tentative kiss, seeking permission. She hesitated for a split second before melting into him, her hands sliding up to rest against his firm chest. The kiss deepened, a surge of electricity coursing through her veins. His arms encircled her waist, pulling her flush against him. She could feel the defined muscles of his abdomen through his shirt, every inch of him radiating strength and warmth. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "This doesn't solve everything," she whispered, her forehead resting against his. "No, but it's a start," he replied, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. She looked up at him, vulnerability and desire swirling in her eyes. "What happens now?" He offered a small, hopeful smile. "We take it one step at a time." She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Okay." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Come with me." "Where?" she asked, curiosity piqued. "Somewhere we can be alone," he said, his eyes holding a promise. She felt a thrill run through her. "Lead the way." They made their way to the secluded hayloft above the barn. The scent of fresh hay mingled with the lingering aroma of horses, creating an earthy ambiance. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the wooden walls, casting warm golden beams across the space. As they climbed the ladder, she couldn't help but admire the way his muscles flexed beneath his shirt. Reaching the top, he offered his hand to help her up. She accepted, the touch sending a spark up her arm. "This place is," she began. "Private," he finished, a playful glint in his eye. She laughed softly. "I suppose it is." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Charm, if you're not comfortable." She placed a finger against his lips, silencing him. "I want this," she assured him, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, relief and desire evident on his face. She reached for the hem of his shirt, her fingers brushing against the hard planes of his stomach as she lifted the fabric. He allowed her to remove it, revealing his sculpted chest and defined abs. A faint trail of dark hair led down from his navel, disappearing beneath the waistband of his jeans. "You're even more impressive up close," she remarked appreciatively, her eyes roaming over his physique. He chuckled, a deep, rich sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "You're not so bad yourself." He gently untied the knot of her shirt, his fingers grazing her skin and igniting a fire beneath it. As the fabric slipped off her shoulders, it revealed a delicate lace bralette that accentuated her curves. The creamy hue of her skin contrasted beautifully with the soft material. "You're stunning," he whispered, his gaze filled with admiration. She felt emboldened by the heat in his eyes. "Flattery will get you everywhere." "That's the idea," he murmured, leaning in to capture her lips once more. Their kisses grew more fervent, a passionate exchange that left them both yearning for more. His hands explored the contours of her body, fingertips tracing delicate patterns along her back and sides. Each touch was deliberate, sending waves of pleasure coursing through her. She slid her hands over his shoulders and down his arms, feeling the strength and definition there. His skin was warm under her touch, the muscles flexing as he moved. She reached for the button of his jeans, her actions guided by instinct and desire. He assisted her, their movements in sync as they discarded the remaining barriers between them. The air was charged with anticipation, every glance and touch heightening the connection they shared. He laid her gently onto the soft bed of hay, the golden light casting a halo around them. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice filled with tenderness. "Yes," she replied confidently, her eyes locked with his. He kissed her deeply, their bodies melding together seamlessly. The world outside ceased to exist as they lost themselves in each other, the rhythm of their hearts setting the pace. Every sensation was intensified, the warmth of his breath against her neck, the brush of his lips along her collarbone, the way his hands cradled her with both strength and gentleness. She felt completely alive, every nerve ending alight with sensation. They moved together in perfect harmony, each responding to the other's needs without words. The intimacy between them transcended the physical, forging a bond that felt unbreakable. As they reached the peak of their shared passion, a profound sense of completeness enveloped them. It was as if they had found a missing piece of themselves in one another. They lay entwined afterward, their breaths slowly returning to normal. He propped himself up on one elbow, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're incredible," he said softly. She smiled, a contented glow emanating from her. "So are you." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I don't want this moment to end." She nestled closer, her head resting against his chest. "Then let's stay a little longer." They remained there, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the soothing sounds of the farm. The distant lowing of cattle and the rustling of leaves created a serene backdrop to their private world. "Tell me something about you," she whispered, tracing lazy circles on his chest. He looked thoughtful. "I used to dream of finding a place where I truly belonged. I think I might have found it." She lifted her gaze to meet his. "Here?" "With you," he clarified, his eyes reflecting sincerity. Her heart swelled at his words. "I've never felt this way before." "Neither have I," he admitted. "It's unexpected, but right." She sighed happily. Maybe the past brought us together for a reason. Perhaps, he agreed. Whatever the reason, I'm grateful. They shared a tender kiss, sealing the unspoken promises between them. A sudden rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, drawing their attention. Sounds like a storm is coming, she remarked. He glanced toward the small window. We should probably get dressed. She nodded reluctantly. Reality awaits. They dressed slowly, stealing glances and smiles as they did. The intimacy of the moment lingered between them like a warm embrace. As they descended from the hayloft, the first droplets of rain began to fall. They made their way back toward the farmhouse, laughter bubbling up as they dashed through the light shower. Reaching the porch, they found shelter just as the rain intensified. Charm's hair clung to her face and she brushed it back, grinning. Guess we timed that perfectly, she said. He laughed, his eyes bright. We make a good team. She felt a surge of affection. Yes, we do. Their joy was interrupted by the sight of Ace standing in the doorway, his expression stormy. Where have you two been? He demanded. Charm's smile faded. We were just... Save it, Ace cut her off. His gaze shifted accusingly to Luke. We need to talk, now. Luke's demeanor stiffened. What's this about? Inside, Ace ordered, turning on his heel. Charm exchanged a worried glance with Luke. This doesn't look good. Stay close, he advised softly. They followed Ace into the living room, where a man in a tailored suit stood waiting. His sharp features and calculating eyes immediately put Charm on edge. Who is this? She asked warily. The man stepped forward, extending a hand that neither of them accepted. Victor Langston, I'm here representing Mr. Williams's interests. Luke narrowed his eyes. What interests might those be? Victor smiled thinly, ensuring that all property rights and familial assets are secured against potential claims. Charm looked at Ace, disbelief and hurt evident on her face. You brought a lawyer into this? Ace met her gaze unflinchingly. I'm doing what's necessary to protect our family. From what? She exclaimed. Luke isn't a threat. Isn't he? Ace challenged. He came here under false pretenses, involved himself with you, and now expects us to believe he's innocent? Luke spoke up. My intentions are not to take anything from you. I just wanted to understand what happened between our grandfathers. Victor interjected smoothly. Be that as it may, Mr. Shrike, any claims you believe you have are invalid. We've taken legal measures to ensure that... Charm felt a surge of anger. This is absurd. There's no need for legal threats. Ace's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. Charm, you don't understand. I'm trying to protect you. By pushing away someone I care about? She retorted. Victor adjusted his cufflinks. Emotions aside, the matter is settled. Mr. Shrike will cease any pursuits related to the property. Luke's jaw tightened. I haven't made any legal claims. Consider this a precaution, Victor replied coldly. Charm stepped forward. This isn't the way to handle this. Ace sighed heavily. What would you have me do? Stand by while he manipulates you and undermines our family's legacy? Listen to reason, she implored. Grandpa knows about Luke and wants to help us resolve this. Ace looked startled. You've spoken to Grandpa? Yes, she confirmed. He wants to put the past behind us. Victor's eyes flickered with annoyance. That complicates things. Luke seized the moment. We can find a way to move forward without legal battles. Ace seemed conflicted, glancing between them. I don't want to lose everything we've worked for. Charm reached out to her brother. You won't. Trust me. After a tense pause, Ace nodded reluctantly. Fine. We'll talk to Grandpa together. Victor frowned. Mr. Williams, I advise against... That will be all, Victor, Ace interrupted firmly. Thank you for your time. Victor's lips pressed into a thin line. Very well. If you need my services again, you know how to reach me. He gathered his briefcase and left without another word. The moment the door closed behind him, a collective sigh seemed to pass through the room. Thank you, Ace, Charm said softly. He rubbed the back of his neck. I hope I'm not making a mistake. Luke offered his hand to Ace. I appreciate your willingness to reconsider. Ace hesitated before shaking it. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't," Luke promised. Charm smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. "Let's go talk to Grandpa." Together, they made their way to Solomon's study, ready to face the challenges ahead as a united front. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the first rays of understanding began to break through, offering hope for the future. As the rain began to fall, Charm and Luke hurried toward the farmhouse to speak with Grandpa Solomon. The storm clouds mirrored the turbulence of their emotions, but they were resolute in their decision to uncover the truths of the past. Inside, the warmth of the farmhouse enveloped them, the familiar sense of wood and baking bread offering a comforting contrast to the tension they felt. They found Grandpa Solomon seated by the fireplace, his wise eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "Grandpa," Charm began softly, her voice tinged with both apprehension and hope. "There's something we need to discuss." Solomon looked up from his book, his gaze settling on them with a mix of curiosity and understanding. "I thought this moment might come. Sit down, both of you." They settled into the plush armchairs opposite him. Luke's hand found Charm's, their fingers intertwining as a silent gesture of support. Solomon regarded Luke thoughtfully. "You've been a hard worker since you arrived, Luke, but I sense there's more to your story." Luke nodded, his emerald eyes meeting the elder's gaze with sincerity. "Yes, sir. My full name is Luke Shrike. I'm Robert Shrike's grandson." A flicker of surprise crossed Solomon's face, followed by a wistful smile. "Robert's grandson. I see. You have his eyes." Charm squeezed Luke's hand gently. "Grandpa, we want to understand what happened between you and Robert. The past has affected us all, and it's time we addressed it." Solomon leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant as memories surfaced. "Robert and I were once like brothers. We built this farm together with dreams of creating a legacy for our families. But as the farm prospered, our visions began to diverge." He sighed heavily. "Robert wanted to expand aggressively, to take risks I wasn't comfortable with. I preferred a steadier approach, valuing sustainability over rapid growth. Our disagreements grew, fueled by pride and stubbornness." Luke listened intently, his expression reflecting both empathy and regret. "My grandfather felt betrayed when he left. He believed you'd chosen the farm over your friendship." Solomon's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I realize now that I let my pride come before our bond. I thought I was protecting our shared dream, but in doing so, I lost a dear friend." Charm leaned forward. "Is there any way to heal these old wounds? To honor both of your legacies?" Solomon looked between them, a soft smile forming. "Perhaps there is. If we can find it in our hearts to forgive, we can forge a new path forward." Just then, Ace entered the room, his expression a mix of hesitation and resolve. "I heard you were talking. Mind if I join?" "Of course, son," Solomon replied, gesturing for him to sit. Ace took a seat beside Charm, casting a glance at Luke. "I owe you both an apology. I let my fears and suspicions cloud my judgment." Luke met his gaze. "I understand why you felt that way. Family is important, and protecting it is natural." A sense of relief washed over the room. Solomon began to speak again, but his words faltered. A pained expression crossed his face, and he clutched his chest. "Grandpa?" Charm exclaimed, rushing to his side. Solomon's breathing became labored. I'm fine," he insisted weakly. Luke quickly moved to support him. "You're not fine. We need to get you to a hospital." Ace sprang into action. "I'll get the car." Charm's eyes filled with fear. "Hold on, Grandpa. Help is coming." They carefully helped Solomon to his feet, Luke's strong arms steadying him as they moved toward the door. The rain had intensified, but they paid it no mind. They settled Solomon into the back seat of the truck, Charm climbing in beside him. Luke took the driver's seat, his jaw set with determination. "Drive safely but quickly," Ace urged from the passenger seat. As they sped toward the hospital, Solomon's condition worsened. His skin grew pale, and his pulse weakened. "Stay with us, Grandpa," Charm pleaded, holding his hand tightly. Luke navigated the slick roads with skill, his focus unwavering. "We're almost there," he assured them. Upon arriving at the hospital, medical staff rushed to their aid. Solomon was whisked away, leaving them to anxiously await news. In the sterile waiting room, the gravity of the situation settled in. Charm paced nervously, her arms wrapped around herself. Ace approached her cautiously. "He'll pull through. Grandpa's strong." She looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "I can't lose him, Ace." He pulled her into a comforting embrace. "We're here for each other. We'll get through this." Luke stood nearby, his hands clenched into fists as he struggled with feelings of helplessness. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Ace regarding him seriously. "Thank you for what you did back there," Ace said sincerely. "You got us here safely." Luke nodded. "I just wish I could do more." Ace hesitated before continuing. "I also need to apologize. I was wrong about you." Luke met his gaze. "Apology accepted. All that matters now is that your grandfather recovers." Ace extended his hand. "Truce?" "Truce," Luke agreed, shaking his hand firmly. A doctor approached them, her expression professional yet compassionate. "Mr. Williams is stable. He suffered a mild heart attack, but with rest and proper care, he should make a full recovery." Relief flooded over them. Charm let out a shaky breath. "Can we see him?" "Yes, but keep it brief," the doctor advised. They entered Solomon's room quietly. He lay propped up against pillows, his complexion already showing signs of improvement. "You're all fussing over nothing," he grumbled good-naturedly. "I've survived worse." Charm smiled through her tears. "You gave us quite a scare." Solomon's gaze softened as he looked at each of them. "Perhaps it was the wake-up call I needed. Life's too short to hold on to past grievances." He reached out to Luke, who stepped closer. "Thank you, son. You acted quickly. I'm grateful." "I'm just glad you're okay," Luke replied humbly. Solomon's eyes twinkled. "You remind me of Robert. He'd be proud of you." Later that evening, back at the farm, the rain had ceased, leaving the world fresh and renewed. Charm and Luke stood on the porch, the cool air wrapping around them. "Today was intense," Charm remarked, gazing out at the shimmering fields. Luke nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It was, but maybe something good will come from it." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lantern light. "I saw the way you handled everything. You were strong, calm. It made me realize how much I care about you." He looked down at her, his expression tender. "Charm, you've become the most important person in my life." She took a step closer, her hand resting on his chest. "I feel the same way." He leaned in slowly, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both gentle and full of promise. The warmth of his embrace enveloped her, and she felt a profound sense of belonging. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered against his lips. He pulled back slightly, searching her eyes. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her cheeks flushed. "I want to be with you." He smiled softly. "Nothing would make me happier." They retreated to her room, the intimacy of the space creating an atmosphere of closeness. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls as they moved together. He traced his fingers along her jawline, his touch sending a delightful shiver through her. "You're so beautiful," he murmured. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with affection. "You make me feel alive." They shared a slow, passionate kiss, their movements unhurried as they savored each moment. She unbuttoned his shirt, her hands exploring the firm muscles beneath. He responded by gently sliding the straps of her dress from her shoulders, the fabric slipping away to reveal the softness of her skin. They laid down together, the world outside fading away. Every touch, every sigh was an expression of the deep connection they shared. Their bodies moved in harmony, a silent conversation of love and trust. As they lay entwined afterward, she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Do you think our families can truly move forward?" she asked quietly. He brushed a kiss against her hair. "I believe so. Today was a turning point." She smiled softly. "I'm glad you're here. It feels right." He tilted her chin up, gazing into her eyes. "You are my home now." The next morning they awoke to the golden light of dawn filtering through the curtains. Charm stretched languidly, a contented sigh escaping her lips. Luke propped himself up on one elbow, watching her with a tender smile. "Good morning." "Morning," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in a long time," he admitted. They dressed and headed downstairs, finding Ace in the kitchen preparing breakfast. "Look who's up early," Ace remarked with a hint of amusement. Charm grinned. "Smells good." He gestured to the table. "Dig in. Thought we could all use a hearty meal." As they sat together, the atmosphere was warm and familial. Laughter and conversation flowed easily, a stark contrast to the tension of days past. After breakfast, they decided to visit Solomon at the hospital. Upon arrival, they found him sitting up in bed, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Can't keep me down for long," he declared. They spent the afternoon sharing stories and making plans for the farm's future. Solomon expressed his desire to integrate Robert Shrike's ideas, creating a fusion of traditions and innovation. "This farm will stand as a testament to both our families," he proclaimed. Weeks passed, and the farm flourished under the collaborative efforts of everyone involved. The rift between the families healed, replaced by a shared vision. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of color, Luke led Charm to the old oak tree where so much had begun. "I have something for you," he said, his voice filled with anticipation. He reached into his pocket and produced a small, intricately carved wooden box. Opening it revealed a delicate ring adorned with a sparkling diamond surrounded by tiny emeralds. Charm gasped softly. "Luke, it's beautiful." He took her hand, his eyes earnest. "Charm, you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. I love you more than words can express. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy welled in her eyes. "Yes, yes, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced, their hearts overflowing with happiness. From a distance, Ace watched with a smile, content in the knowledge that his sister had found true happiness. The wedding was a joyous celebration held under the canopy of the old oak tree. Friends and family gathered, their faces alight with happiness. Charm walked down the aisle, her white gown flowing gracefully, a wreath of wildflowers adorning her hair. Luke awaited her, looking handsome and serene in a tailored suit. As they exchanged vows, the love between them was palpable. They promised to honor their pasts while embracing the future together. When they were pronounced husband and wife, cheers erupted. They kissed, sealing their commitment in front of all who mattered most. Grandpa Solomon beamed with pride, his eyes misty. "Robert would be happy," he whispered to himself. Ace raised a toast during the reception. "To Charm and Luke," he declared, "may your love continue to grow and inspire us all." That night, under a canopy of stars, Charm and Luke danced together, the soft strains of music weaving around them. "Are you happy?" he asked, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, resting her head against his chest. He held her close. "Here's to a lifetime of moments like this." She smiled, her heart full. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They knew challenges would come, but together they could face anything. Their journey had brought them through secrets and storms, leading them to a place of unity and love. As the evening drew to a close, they slipped away to the quiet of their home. In each other's arms, they found solace and joy, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives. Thank you for joining us on Charm and Luke's unforgettable journey. Their story shows us that love and courage can overcome even the deepest of secrets. If their tale moved you or made you think about your own path to happiness, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your feelings in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Will I Be Happy for more inspiring stories that touch the heart. Until next time, remember, sometimes happiness is just a heartbeat away.